So my name is Cyril. I've been living for a long time in Asia, in China, Japan, and Korea. I joined a fund called SOSV about 6 years ago, and we had a crazy, funky idea to start accelerators in China, actually, with the first accelerator in China that I built in Shanghai called China Accelerator. At the same time, I started to invest in the US quite a bit, and that led me to be the first investors in companies like Leapmotion that just got mentioned, and Farm Labs, and a few others. We've been witnessing how hard it was to bring hardware to market for all those years. And about 4 years ago, I decided to build HAX, so I moved to Shenzhen and built an accelerator. 4 years later, it's a little bit of a bigger beast nowadays because we're running actually 3 programs. One in Shenzhen, which is the original accelerator, and it's focused on product market fit. The one is in San Francisco, so I moved to San Francisco about 6 months ago to start HAX Boost, which is focused on product retail fit. And really focused on the bootcamp for sales and marketing and retail and distribution. And we've just launched, or actually starting in a couple of weeks in New York, something called HAX Futures, which is a joint venture with BMW Mini, and that joint venture is named UrbanX and will be focused on very local infrastructure IoT and based in Brooklyn up there. We were the first one to do that. We are probably the largest investor in hardware space nowadays, with 133 companies going through those accelerators, 95 through the HAX accelerator in Shenzhen, and the rest through Boost and a few other things that we do. It's been interesting ride, because originally we thought we would actually focus on consumer, but it became very clearly quick that actually that would not be the case. And so we've developed the year's tracks, and 60% of our companies are B2C, 40% are B2B, and all those tracks means that there are special resources, methodologies, and processes that we've developed across the world, essentially, to deliver for those kind of companies. So lifestyle, health, robotics, IoT infrastructure, and advanced manufacturing. Most of the teams are Americans. If they come over to Shenzhen, they spend 3 months and a half. If it's in San Francisco, it's about 42 days. The New York program is about 3 months. 20% from Europe, 20% from Asia, fairly distributed. There are many companies to highlight and talk about, and that's not the point tonight, but you may recognize a few names. We've done 58 Kickstarter campaigns. We are averaging $450,000 for each one of them. Some were started about 4 years ago, like MakeBlock. Some others are more recent, like Print, that raised money from GGV. MakeBlock raised from Sequoia. Volterra was a circuit board printer in the invention of the year last year. Nextfinco is a $9 computer, and many other things in many other different countries, working with Xiaomi and working with other things. Any one of you backed any of those projects here? None of it? One? $9 computer? Okay, yeah, second biggest Kickstarter, 40,000 backers out there. With all those experiences and adventures, we've been through quite a bit. Today I want to talk about the Hoverboard Craze. Anybody has a hoverboard? 1, 2, 4. Okay, cool. So it's quite popular, or maybe who knows? Maybe it will become more and more popular. The hoverboard is an interesting story because it's really about how a product can rise and become a hit extremely quickly, and how essentially the waves and the tide is rising at the same time as the market. And I'm going to deep dive into 8 lessons that we learned from this thing happening over the past year, which actually apply to every one of you building a hardware company. First of all, it's pretty amazing because what happens is that the market is just going faster than what we can talk about it. And there is this sentiment that when you are launching a company for the first time or a product for the first time, you are essentially the market, and you are going to own the market and be every single bit of it. But the reality is that you're only generally part of a subset of a market that you need to identify very clearly. It's very difficult to be the leader in an entire space. There are very few companies that manage to do that, or it became niche products or niche markets that can be big. Of course, like Fitbit, for example, is probably the best example of that. But everybody else is still fighting, essentially, out there. Started with a Segway. You've probably heard of some of the other things over there: One Wheel and Z-Board and Boosted Boards and Hoover Tracks and the 9-Bot Mini. Essentially, it's a highly fragmented already market, which has also different value prop, different price points, different everything, and a very confused market about why they should use the solo wheel versus the Hoover Tracks over there, depending on what you do. They're already established brands as well, which is pretty interesting. What's happening is actually commoditization, and commoditization reached light speed. We've been stationed inside of the electronics market in Shenzhen for the last 4 years, and it's been pretty amazing to see how every single product that was coming to maturity will end up in the markets for a tenth of the price, and available for anybody to buy or to license or to modify and do something with. And so there we go. Highly commoditized essentially is a problem for startups, right? Because there is only two things, or maybe one that you have if you are a startup advantage. It's speed. It's certainly not money. So you really want to get to market fast, and that includes not only the pre-launch period and the crowdfunding. It also includes getting to market physically and shipping super quick, because if you're onto something, obviously there will be lots of competition coming in, and it's not about China anymore. It's just gloves are off. It's everybody competing with everybody. Sony and Samsung and Apple and Google, and nobody cares. There was a time, the glorious time where startups were kind of protected, and you would not actually copy startups. But that has changed quite a bit. So get ready for quite a fight, but also for the fact that at some point your hardware will be commoditized, and it's actually a good thing. That proves that you are doing something right. But you need to have other ways to either monetize. You need to protect yourself with science, with software, with community, with anything that you can. Because there is one thing sure that I'm sure of is that things will get just more commoditized. Actually, there is a company called Xiaomi in China, which was the largest telephone maker in the country, but decided to go for becoming a distribution channel for startups, and is employing kind of a commoditization which is based on a different business model. Essentially, they've launched, for example, some Fitbit competitor for I think the Mi Band is $15 or something. Why? Because their entire business model is actually based on something different. They are making phones, and they want people to pay for content. They want people to use the phone for payments, and etc. And so, as such, we're calling that actually Xiaomization, which is really the commoditization, squared, that is happening in the market. So, get to market fast. There are many horrible things in running a hardware startup, and if you are running one, get ready for a very, very long journey. One of which is you cannot think that your invention per se is it. You still have to take it to market and productize it, and commercializing things is actually really hard. That's the real complexity of a hardware startup, is that it has to evolve from, hey, we're building a product, to, hey, we're launching a campaign, we need to be good at PR, to actually we need to be good at manufacturing now and deliver something, to how lucky were we with the product market fit, and now we have to turn the organization into a sales and marketing engine. Really difficult. You have to do that in a couple of years to actually take off. And sometimes you are too early. It's just of course you had Palm and many other devices that were too early to market, and the world is filled with people who invented things and never ever delivered. Sometimes they were just too early for their time, and VR is another good example of that. Obviously, the Segway in the middle was here for the last 15 years, and nobody bought them. But then you end up with the Hoover Trax, which is just rightly priced, hitting at the right time with the right technology, and you have a hit. So number 4, China has a different way to talk about intellectual property, and trying to kind of define it. Obviously, the American or Western way to do it is through broadcasting an invention to the world and getting paid for it. But in China, it's actually more of a network that exchanges between themselves data and sometimes products and parts of products. So part of this is part of the movement that came out of this is called Shanghai. And Shanghai is the incremental innovation that happened in China, in particular in Shenzhen, and that led to actually have people mistake this as copycat, but that's not what is really going on. What is really going on in China at the supply chain level is a rationalization of the supply chain. It's how can they be more efficient in taking parts of products, which includes electronics and mechanical, and the actual productization and going through the factory in the most efficient way that is as cheap as possible, and that can be replicated. This is how you end it with. I remember last year we were running around the markets because that's always the best indicator. There was a couple of years ago we started to see the Apple Watch that looks like a knockoff. And we bought some, and actually, it looked like an Apple Watch. It was not an Apple Watch because it cannot run the iOS. So it was running, of course, Android, sometimes skin like an iOS, which is pretty funny. But despite the look, actually, it was not a smartwatch. It had a slot for an SD card. It had a slot for a SIM card, so it was actually a phone. It had a camera. Even had an FM radio, which is really awesome, and it was only $49. And that's retail price. It was down there, and you could buy it. So all that are things to be well understood, but also take advantage of. That's the reason why our accelerator is right in the middle of this, is to really understand how things move, and by getting cheaper, that means that all those business models will evolve, and you see it anyway with Amazon. Pushing through Dash, for example, is very important and interesting to follow. There is a whole industrialization side of this, which still mind boggles me. And for some reason, there is a tremendous flexible supply chain that can move essentially from tablets to the selfie stick last year to just a new thing, and overnight you end up with it's not hundreds. We're talking about I think it's 5,000 factories that moved from doing something else to making hoverboard overnight. 5,000. That's a lot of factories. I don't know how many there are around here, but. You can imagine if a large part of it will just change, and decide to only build this and flood the market. So extremely flexible, extremely adaptable environment that serves startups very well, actually, because startups are always changing stuff, and so it's actually very good to evolve in that environment. SN6, hits are very hard to predict, and there aren't that many hit products anyway, at the end of the day. What's interesting here in the quote is January 2015 was probably at CES, it looks like a carpet at CES, was someone for TechCrunch was like, oh yeah, it's fun for 5 minutes, nobody will buy this. Of course the prices dropped because of the entire thing happening, and you end up with millions and millions of units being sold a year later. So the hard part is figuring out who's going to stay, obviously, and what's a hit and what's a fad. There were lots of fads, including in hardware. Most of the time in the toy industry is really hit driven. So you see that with Furby. or the Tamagotchi and other things. What's interesting about Furby is that actually it's making a comeback these days with more electronics in it. We'll see where that ends up, but there will probably be just a very few number of brands left. Ninebot bought Segway's patents and Segway as a company, which was an interesting move. They raised, I think, $90 million to actually acquire the company. But other companies came out, and they are very interesting. Maybe that's for the other slide on the patent side of the who's suing whom and why and what's going on over there, which is going to be pretty entertaining and very hard to define who created and who invented either the self-balancing mechanism or any other thing that is inside of this. There are two more lessons here. Buyers beware when you buy something out there. Even though it's written, certified, it actually probably is, because it's still probably going through the import there. Doesn't mean that it's safe to ride, obviously. Yeah, there are no address and potential fake components, and everybody should do proper due diligence, and that includes you if you are building something. The game is still on. We received a very odd call from Mark Cuban, I think about 6 months ago. I don't know how if it's from Shark Tank or something else, but he saw this coming, and he wanted in and actually I think invested in a company that does this, and he's putting some resources behind it. There are two very big brands nowadays, Ninebot and Razor, not Razer, that you've heard of a little earlier. So Ninebot bought Segway. They came up with all kinds of different shapes now. So whether it's the tall one or the small one, those are not toys. So the actual market is going to segment, and in ways which I'm not sure it's going to take off entirely. But for people using the Ninebot, if you ever ride one, you are going to be amazed by the technology and the flexibility and how it actually works. It's a great tool. It might be dangerous in New York, which is, I guess, why another reason why you may not want to have one. But it's also very fun. It's a hit product. We'll see if it's a fad. I think there will be really big winners and really big company coming out of this. One of them is probably there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Forgot to time myself.
Cool. So tell us a little bit more about. So thanks, by the way, for focusing the talk on this and not on the commercial. But now's the time to do the commercial. So if I'm a hardware company now and I want to go through HAX, what do I do? How long does it last? What do I get?
Yeah, so it really depends on what stage you are. We've always been extremely early stage for the accelerator part. We really like to mess up with the actual product. Generally, we take it, from prototype to we call it productization. It's kind of a barbaric word, but it's really the phase where you are still figuring out the market fit in terms of product. You actually know about the solution, but you are actually building the thing. And that's actually the hardest part of what we do in Shenzhen, and that's why we do it in Shenzhen, is because we're leveraging the supply chain to actually make the product before we launch it. So all the Kickstarters that we've launched were launched at the end of the program with an existing actual product that was manufacturable. And the idea is to actually, the entire idea of HAX is to compress time and of course resources and money, but it's really about, again, getting to market quick, because we've got caught ourselves with great products being launched on Kickstarter and delivered 12 months or 18 months later, and the market caught up and competition, big companies caught up, and that was a problem for those companies to actually reach some kind of escape velocity. which we are trying to solve now with the HAX Boost piece in San Francisco, because it's also extremely difficult to raise funding for a hardware company. It got easier, but I don't think it's easier by any means, really, and especially now in this environment. So actually being able to get to revenue first and then scale up is critical, and that's why we're working on the sales and marketing piece nowadays in San Francisco. So we have all the major retailers on the planet coming over to work with those teams on their we call that product retail fit, which is how do you get into a store with the appropriate packaging, the appropriate point of sale, the appropriate strategy. What do you sell to buyers? What are the margins? What are the logistics and all that? So we do that hand in hand with all the major retailers coming over. And the goal again is can we get more money in the pockets of the entrepreneurs, more revenue, solves everything, right? If some of the companies that I mentioned from HAX over there reach profitability, and the sky was the limit afterwards. And I encourage all of you to build sustainable companies first and scale after.
Do we have questions up there?
Yeah, so B2B hardware is a weird thing to define, and so I mentioned over there it's about 60% B2C, 40% B2B, but all that is separated in the 4 categories essentially. There was lifestyle, which is really pure B2C and all our Kickstarter campaigns essentially. Then the rest was B2B with health and robotics and IoT, infrastructure type of thing, and advanced manufacturing. And so we realized the same thing is all of those companies have different sales cycle. In this case, most of them cannot launch on Kickstarter, so they don't have necessarily help on the product market fit that it offers. I generally do not emphasize the fact that you can actually finance the company with it. You can to some extent, but keep in mind that the money that you get is still a liability in many ways. But I'll say a meaningful portion now of the companies are on the B2B side, and the reason is that a lot of the low-hanging fruit on the consumer has been taken. And also because of that competition is really particular to B2C here. It's really, can you get to a hit? And that's really difficult, actually. I almost wish that companies that are launching do not have a hit, because in some cases it actually impeaches the company to develop their product market fit in hardware. Because if you do a big Kickstarter, the issue with it is that, of course, you will have to deliver it, but then you get framed, and the real thing, the best companies will be able to get to market, learn more about that market, get to V2, and get to the second product, which eventually will actually be the hit because of the better understanding. You may be, if you have too big of a hit the first time, then you are going to deliver that product for a long time, and that may impeach you to become bigger, actually. It's kind of counterintuitive. In the B2B world, so yeah, a lot of that is gone. So it's pretty natural that now, the attention of startups is toward B2B. We've seen that with SaaS, before consumer internet. And in many ways, the market seems so much bigger. So we're pretty excited about B2B opportunities. They are really hard. We're trying to find new ways to distribute them. We're trying to find new processes to get them to market as well. But I think those will come to fruition and create great companies in those spaces.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.